Hi, everybody. We're going to start the IEP advocacy discussion. I'm Sonia Rigglesworth. We have a 2.5-year-old duper, and this is Catherine Witcher. And she's been an advocate for 20 years and has a brother with Down syndrome. She's previously a special education teacher and works nationwide, but offers courses and assistance internationally and has these courses online. So the items that she's going to talk about are not necessarily geared strictly for the US, but on a broader scope that you can apply wherever you may be. So thank you.
Good morning. All right, so I'm typically a walker and a talker and a dig in, and if you have your IEP with, I'm flipping through it right with you and doing that. So what we'll do, since we're recording, for those who can't be here, I'm gonna go through slides. When that's done, then I'm probably gonna jump down there and we're gonna have a conversation. Then afterwards, especially if some of you guys have to leave for that, you're gonna find me at the table right outside the door. There's extra chairs there. And if you walk up and somebody's talking, grab a piece of paper at my table, put down your name, your number, I'll text you, and I'll let you know that we have some free time or there's a gap there. So I'm around to serve you as much as I can through all of today. And I will sit at that table as long as needed to make that happen. So as Sonia mentioned, I was a special education teacher inspired by my brother. So I thought, why is my mom asking for all of this stuff in my brother's education? Like, why won't everybody just do their job and get it done? I'm gonna go be a teacher and I'm gonna do it differently and I'm just gonna make it happen. Yeah, so I got into the system. And I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree, I have 5 different teaching certificates. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do this. And the system's broken. And it's not the people inside that are broken. Sometimes the system has worn them down, but the system doesn't work on common sense. So what I want to bring to you today is some things that you can bring to the team to up-level your child's education. And these are all things that work in the system. So before you think, but my district will never do that, but I asked that before they said no, or there's no way they're going to hear me out. Trust me, there's ways to get that done. All right, so we're not going to get into kind of write the advocacy letter exactly like this and then push them that way into that. We're not going to get into those pieces. I'm really about helping you understand what is most important to advocate for. Because we can advocate for 100 things. No kidding, right? 100 things that could be changed in your child's education. But what are the top 3 to 5 things that we can start working on to create that domino effect so we have movement forward in your child's education? So we're going to go through some of those kind of questions and things that you should ask your team. We're going to talk about 10 things you should ask for in your child's IEP, how to pick IEP goals that make sense, strategies to get more with less conflict, what to do when the team says no, how to collaborate. We're going to talk about some outside therapy. I know from speaking with you guys 2 years ago and continuing to work with several dupe families, it's very complex. We got a lot of pieces in motion, right? We got a lot of outside opinions of what's going on, what should be worked on, and then we have kind of the standard of what's done in school. So how do we do that? And what is a medical diagnosis versus an educational diagnosis, and how do we bridge that gap? Because there's a huge difference, and that causes a lot of frustration. I probably spend half my time when it comes to advocacy, it's more of bridging the communication gap and the definition gap of what needs to occur with that. So, purpose of an IEP, I don't teach the law. I'm not a lawyer. People ask me how come I'm not a lawyer. I say it's because then I'd have to be even more careful about what I say. And I like to just get to solutions, and I don't want to be, okay, so purpose of an IEP. So I don't teach the law, but I do teach this one section that's going to really drive a different thought process when it comes to your child's IEP. When I ask people what the purpose of an IEP is, I hear all the time, to keep the teachers accountable, to decide what the child should be working on, to make sure that they're learning. And I hear kind of these in the trenches answers, when really the purpose of an IEP is to prepare your child for further education, employment, and independent living. All right, that's huge. So if we look at that, it actually and I know that I got a lot of parents in here that have young kids, and you're like, that's crazy, I cannot think that far ahead, all right? But as I mentioned, I have a brother with Down syndrome. So I live in the special needs community every day, and I hear all the time, I can't think to the future. And I say, but think about it. Like, my brother can make a cup of coffee for himself, right? He's 39. What skills does that take? Does that mean that I want your 3, 4, and 5-year-old going to school to learn how to make coffee or bake a cake or to do those things? No, but there's numbers. There's tasks that need to get done. There's things like following directions. There's routines. There's knowing how to change up in that routine. There's all these skills that are appropriate. So stick with me when I say further education, employment, independent living. I'm talking about backward chaining, thinking what do we need that's most important, and then how does that apply to a 3-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, and making these, when I say SMART goals, I'm not talking specific, measurable, yeah, we want all of those things. I'm talking about SMART as in it's going to prepare your child for further education, employment, independent living. Ooh. All right. First presentation of the day gets all the good, kind of things happening here. All right. Here we go, 10 IEP questions to ask.
I'm sorry, can we have a slight light just to take notes?
I wish, I don't think that this was planned. Yeah, I'm thinking this was a glitch. So since we're limited on time, I thought I'd keep going because I can see scrambling back there. All right. Oh, somebody, yep. All right. Okay. Getting a draft IEP. Do you guys get drafts of your IEPs? Have you gotten them ahead of time? Most schools do not offer them, and a lot of times I see this look of like, I had no idea. I had no idea that I could get them. So asking for a draft of the IEP is super important, and all right, so what we want to do is ask for a draft ahead of time. You want to ask for it in writing. You want to make sure that you're asking for the reason this is something that's not in the notes, so you'd want to write this one down. You're asking for a draft so you can participate as an equal IEP team member. That's something that is your right to have. In fact, teachers, teams, administrators that don't want you to have a draft to participate equally ahead of time have just been burned by somebody who got a draft and honestly went off on them, right? And caused some miserable situations. When really you're positioning this as that you need a draft of the IEP so you can be an equal IEP team member. If you need to reinforce, I understand this is a draft and I will hold all questions until the meeting, that's fine. You can add that sentence in if you need to. So it's, yes, I can attend the meeting on this date, right? They're giving you 10 days notice of, here's your upcoming IEP date, or maybe they gave it to you 3 months ago of here's your upcoming IEP date. Then you felt, yes, I can attend that date. Please provide me with a draft 5 days ahead of time so I can participate as an equal IEP team member. And then I understand this is a draft. I'll hold all questions to the meeting. All right? If they're going to say no, because you've emailed it to them, they're going to email you back a reason that it's a no. A lot of times I don't push this. I don't want to cause an advocacy battle when we don't need to, right? So I coach my clients and say, if they're really not going to give us anything ahead of time, then you're going to go to the IEP meeting and consider it an information gathering meeting. No decisions need to be made at that meeting anyway. Nothing needs to be decided at that meeting, right? Everybody loses sleep the night or days before the IEP because they're thinking, oh my gosh, all these big decisions are coming up. First of all, IEP can be changed at any time, right? So, and you don't need to make decisions at that meeting. So if you're not going to get a draft ahead of time, if the OT shows up with her goals that you can tell that she wrote that morning, life happens, it's okay. We can show some grace in those situations sometimes, but I want you to consider an information gathering meeting. Present levels of data. This is something that you're always going to ask for. You'd be amazed at how many times I get IEPs that I have no idea if it's a good goal because I don't know where the child's starting at, right? The child will learn colors. Do they know any colors now? The child knows 3 colors, will learn 10 colors. What 3 colors do they know? So present levels. And I have some examples in here that you won't be able to read everything right on the screen. when we get to that, but you'll get the idea of what I mean when I say simple. Simple present levels of data. It does not need to be overcomplicated. Leave the complicated data if you're in ABA therapy. They have all the complicated data. Leave it to the BCBAs to do that, okay? When we're talking school data, we're talking what 3 colors do they know? What 3 words do they know? What 5 letters do they know? How many steps, directions can they follow? You know, we're talking basic stuff. Where are we starting? So make sure that you have updated present levels of data. You cannot decide a good IEP goal until you have that. Behavior data. A lot of time with behavior data, it starts with, we feel that your child is not paying attention enough. We feel that he's off task all the time. The team is really struggling with keeping him or her on task. Those are all opinions, all right? The minute that you hear the word we feel, red flag. I'm not saying red flag, go, oh, I caught you. There's no data. Don't do that, all right? Do that up here. You do that with me on the phone. Don't do that in the meeting. Take a note. We feel. Write down exactly what they said. We feel. Every time you hear we feel, write it down. Because you won't be able to keep up with all of those in the IEP meeting or in a parent-teacher conference because they're going to say we feel. Or we've seen this happen, but how often have they really seen it? That's an opinion, right? We feel all the time, like as parents, right? We're watching, oh my gosh, this happens all the time. Really, it happens like once a day, but we're just exhausted from it, right? So that's an opinion. So your behavior data, same thing. I want to make sure, and again, leave the complicated data up to the therapist, and especially your outside therapist. When I'm talking behavior data, I'm talking how many times did they really have to redirect your child? And did they redirect appropriately? All right, how many times did your child really go ask for help? Maybe the teacher is overwhelmed with a lot of things that's going on and it feels like your child's going up and wanting attention from them, 100 times a day when really it's 3, but if you multiply that 3 times the other 5 kids that are in the room and then put those 6, attempts from those children, right? It feels like all the time. So a lot of times behavior data gets skewed just by feelings of what's going on, so make sure that you have that. Accommodations and modifications is also known as supplementary aids and services in your IEP. Everybody has these, every state. Everything that I'm teaching you right now is in every IEP. Accommodations and modifications. Please look at these, especially as back to school time comes. These are the things that have to be in place from day 1 for your child to be successful. I do not expect the team to work on IEP goals in the first week. Maybe not even the first 2 weeks. Are we like really digging in, right? First 2 weeks of school, it's about getting to know routines and what are the expectations and how do we put all of this together, all right? But we can't know routines and expectations and put it all together if accommodations and modifications aren't put in from day 1. These are the things that you should be concerned about before the start of the school year. Does your child have appropriate seating? Are all of the aides in place? Do they have all of their staff hired? Do we have sensory breaks planned out, sensory tools available for them? These are all the things that are listed in accommodations and modifications. Your child honestly doesn't care if they're going to work on their colors during those first 2 weeks though, but they do care if they're on sensory overwhelm, right? So we have to make sure that these things are in place from day 1 of when school starts. Placement with schedule. So there is a big issue all the time when it comes to placement. How much are we spending in this classroom versus that classroom, or how much time with a speech therapist, an OT, and there's minutes all laid out everywhere, and then they have to lay out the minutes page, which is your placement page, right, of where your child's going to get services and how that's going to look. And a lot of times there's conflict on this because, again, we're speaking 2 different languages. So this is the tool that you need from now forever, okay? When they talk about placement for your child, say, can you give me a mock schedule right now? Like, show me what the day will look like. Especially if your child's going to spend some time in one classroom and some time in another classroom. You want to know what that looks like. Sometimes when you lay out a schedule, you realize that your child is transitioning, even if it's to the speech, to the OT, to the PT, you realize they're transitioning a ridiculous amount of times throughout the day. And you're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea their schedule looked like that. As their parent, I could tell you that they would be having a meltdown or wanting to sleep all afternoon with this. Because somebody like, hello, right? It's like, or their morning is so chaotic, the way that they have it set up with transitions. No wonder why the child doesn't want to get on the bus, right? So ask for not just the placement, but you want to know, what does the schedule look like? Oh, I'm sorry, we can't get that to you. Our schedules aren't completely made yet. Yes, you're not asking for exactly minute by minute, right? We don't need to know that at 9:52 they're exactly, just transition here, we'll spend time with this person. Transition to this place, we'll spend time with that person. Or people transitioning in. For those of you that have self-contained classrooms, it is busy in that classroom. There is chaos in that. I was a self-contained teacher. Oh my goodness. There was nothing I could do except for make sure that everybody was where they needed to be when people were coming in and out of the room. So this way it wasn't like, hi, how you doing? What's going on? And everybody kind of disrupting the classroom. So you want to check on who's transitioning in. So if you're thinking, my child doesn't transition out a whole lot, then who's transitioning in? Because if your child's not going out, there are people coming in to serve them. Okay, and reward system. Please ask what motivators are in place for your child. Here's the thing, school is tough. There are a lot of demands put on your child throughout the day. And if they don't have a reward system that's implemented consistently every day, and your child is doing tasks that are hard, that they are going to feel like they are failing and struggling with every day, and there are not appropriate motivators for your child in there, teachers come up with great motivator ideas. They're cute, they're fun, they don't always work, all right? They don't always work for your child. It's not that the teacher's not trying, it's not that they don't have something in place, but do they have something in place that will work for your child? So please check the reward systems. How will the minutes be used? Now, all of these questions that I'm giving you, these are the things when you're like, I don't know, I feel like my child needs more. I feel like I don't know what to ask for. I feel like I just need to know more of what's going on inside. These are all the things that I ask every client that I'm working with. And when I'm going through a document, these are the things that I'm looking for. So then, as I get to know the family and the priorities, I can say, okay, so based on what's happening, what we know what's going on, and based on what your priorities are, now we have a starting point. Because I don't want to assume somebody's using their minutes wrong. I want to ask them how they intend to use their minutes. Because if a speech therapist has 120 minutes a week with your child, yet it's all done in group setting, and it wasn't expressed to you that it would be done in group setting, and now you're upset that it was in group setting, which if you thought it was going to be one-on-one or small group, and now you realize it's with 6 or 7 other kids, that's a communication breakdown. So we have to ask these things. How will the minutes be used? There's direct minutes and there's consult minutes. Direct minutes does not mean that they are working directly with your child one-on-one. Direct minutes just mean that they are serving your child in some capacity where they're having contact with your child. That can be in a large group, a small group, or one-on-one. Consult minutes are when they are not working directly with your child. Consult minutes, here's a tip for you guys. You guys probably have a lot of communication needs, right, that need to be met in school when it comes to assistive technology or visuals or just different, and for feeding issues, so maybe with the OT and that. A lot of times, therapists feel like they don't have time to get all of those pieces into place and then they can serve your child. Consult minutes are where you can actually advocate for the therapist to have extra time to do that. Example is, I'm sitting at an IEP meeting and they came up with this great new plan of this visual schedule and how they were going to change it and where the motivators are going to be, and we get all of this stuff done, and then I ask the question, who's going to put it together? And who's going to change it every week? Because that's what with this situation, it has to be a rotating type thing. And who's going to change it every week? And who's going to teach the child what the expectations are? Where do those minutes come in? And they're like, And I said, well, I feel that the speech therapist would be best. Does anybody see any different? And you can see the speech therapist go like blank, like, shoot, when am I supposed to get this done? And I said, then she needs some extra consult minutes, so she has dedicated time to do this. And she told me, nobody's ever advocated for that, because that's advocating for the team to have the time to serve your child. That is, when you're advocating for your child, you're really advocating for the whole team to be able to do their job better for your child. So keep that in mind. Consult minutes are huge when it comes to prep work of things that need to happen. Consult minutes can also be used to take data. Speaking of data, confirm how the data is going to be collected and how it's going to be shared. Every one of your IEPs on the goals, it says how data is going to be collected and how often it will be shared with you. And you're thinking, I don't get data, I get progress reports that say check marks, making progress, making progress, making progress. No, you're actually supposed to get the data that supports that at minimum at the intervals of the regular report cards that would go out. So at minimum, you actually want to see the data. And they'll say, well, what do you mean by data? You actually want to see the checklists or the log of observations or the work portfolio. Those different things that are listed to collect data, you want to see those. Proof, okay? And again, not saying that they're not doing it or that your child's not making progress. I have to reassure teams that all the time. I'm not saying the child's not making progress. We just want to see where the progress is at. How is this working? If you see progress that goes just like this, that's a problem. Our kids don't learn like this. Data should look like this. Data should be awesome day, had an ear infection. Awesome day, didn't sleep that night. Right? So if we're lucky, we get 3, 4, 5 awesome days, maybe even 2 awesome weeks. But then something's going to happen. None of us learn exactly in a straight line. So you want to be aware of that. How do we get truthful data? You tell the team and you convince the team that it's okay with it when things aren't going right to tell you. All right, you have to convince them to trust you that it's okay to share when things are not going right. That's a verbal conversation. I always say everything in writing or it didn't happen. This is a verbal conversation. We don't need documentation of it just because this is relationship building with the team. So it wasn't until I had a horrible year as a teacher. Horrible. Things didn't work administratively behind the scenes. Parents were told things were going to happen in a program. I was never informed, so of course I didn't execute because I had no idea that it was supposed to be happening, right? Just a lot of conflict behind the scenes of what was going on. I was called into the principal's office. Never good as a kid or a teacher. So called into the principal's office. There's a parent sitting right there. The principal is sticking up for me. The parent wanted to see me. Principal's sticking up for me. Like, she was just given the orders to execute, is basically what, right? She was just given the orders to execute. It's like October 1st. We've gotten her the supplies because what they wanted me to execute, I had no books, I had no curriculum. I had nothing to execute, even if I wanted to execute. So the principal knew that he was on the line too. And the parent took a swing at me. All right? I'm not saying that physical is a go-to response and that all teachers have had that experience, but verbal punches are just as scary for teachers, okay? So they've had this. It is common. Remember, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know that it's happening on a regular basis. Most parents who show up to something like this, you're not that parent. You would never could imagine literally verbally assaulting or physically taking action, right? This is what's going on. This is why they're scared, all right? They've been hurt. They went to school to give your child the best. They got in a system that doesn't allow that. And then there's a lot of conflict that's going on. You have to build that trust. The next year, I'm in a different district. Well, I left that year. The principal told me, if you were my daughter, I wouldn't want you teaching here. I'll give you any letter of recommendation you want. I said, okay. So I moved on to a different district. That district was fantastic, and I had this parent that came up to me. And I'm still a green teacher. I was in like my second year of teaching. And she came up to me, and the parent said, anything you want in this classroom, you let me know. I'll get it for you. And I was like, oh, all right, let's see. So I started coaching parents kind of in that concept of like, well, what else do we need? So that's how this, when I'm talking about these advocacy strategies, it's about building that team. And then she also said, my child's not perfect and he's not going to make progress all the time and you're going to get stuck. I'd rather you tell me that he's stuck when he's stuck than wait 3 months and tell me later that you haven't been able to get it done. Tell me, let me problem solve with you. I trust your expertise, but I know my son. Let's put them together. Oh my goodness, best school year ever. Right? The entire classroom brought that, just having that parent say that to me as a teacher. I encourage all of my clients to have that version of a conversation. Whatever comes naturally for you and the way that you want to connect is letting them know that things are not going to be perfect and that you expect there to be some failure, some getting stuck. So when you do that, you also, then that's when you confirm. So how are we going to take data? How are we going to share this? How are we going to stay on this top of this together? All the data collection is inside the IEP. So that's the concrete, that's the hold them accountable, but you have that conversation to make sure that you're getting truthful data. What's the preferred method of miscellaneous info that you're going to share, right? So did your child sleep? Did they eat? What happened at school? The teacher was missing. There was a substitute aid that day. There was what's going on? How are we going to communicate? Have that put into the IEP. If you need something more formal and they're not giving you information, you guys can have a school-to-home communication plan put into the IEP. Well, some teachers talk to me and some teachers don't. Or last year I got this information, this year I didn't. If it's written in the IEP, then you have consistent information as best as possible from year to year. So have a school-to-home communication plan put into the IEP. All right. Goals that are going to make sense. I'm going to kind of fly through this piece because I want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. And I know we had quite a few people walk in late, and then we're going to continue the conversation outside at the table for that. And for those of you that can't stick around, then you'll just leave me your name and a number that I can text you at, and I'll let you know. I know, but that means 30 minutes of this and 30 minutes of Q&A. I got it. So we're so IEP goals that make sense. Don't worry about trying to squint and read. It'll give you a headache. You got a long day ahead of you. All right. So I'm going to kind of summarize. These are, and I'm going to jump and tell you, these are the goals that don't make sense. However, they may look like some of your child's goals. And you're thinking, well, this is how IEP goals should be. See, that's the thing. You only know your child's IEP, or maybe some of your friends' kiddos' IEPs that are in the same district. IEPs are written differently everywhere. So this is, James will communicate mathematical ideas, reasoning, and their implications using multiple representations, including symbols, diagrams, graphs, and language as appropriate for 7 out of 10 trials for 70% accuracy. Does your brain hurt yet? Okay, let me tell you. This is a 3rd grader with Down syndrome who cannot add at this point or subtract. So here's what they did. They pulled a state standard with a bunch of educational jargon, popped it into the IEP, made it sound really fancy, and moved on. So I stepped in to the IEP when it looked like this, and we are still in the process of changing it. We've gotten some changes done. On the upside, the parents moving to a new district, which means that we have a whole new fresh start, which is sometimes everybody says, well, which district is the best or which state is the best? I don't have that, but sometimes fresh starts, when you're really, really stuck, it just works in their favor. In this case, it will. Plus, they're in Texas. Do I have any Texas people here? Texas is tough. They like to play the runaround game with things. Okay, so this one here, too, just to give you an idea of this is, now mind you, I told you about a 4th grader with significant language and reading delays, okay? James will use ideas, illustrations, titles, topic sentences, keywords, and foreshadowing clues to make and confirm predictions, 7 out of 10 trials with 70% accuracy. He's going to be able to recognize illustrations and, recognize known sight words, recognizing the title, understand key vocabulary words. By using these tools of comprehension, James will then be able to sequence events and be able to predict what might happen next. All right, there's like 4 goals in there at one time, all right? So he needs to read and predict and sequence and figure out, kind of the moral of the story and topics and titles. No, okay? 1 goal per goal sheet, all right? I'm not kidding you. If you could get your team to narrow down that would be huge. This was we had a math goal, we had a reading goal, and then this is social studies. Again, showing you kind of, and for those of you that have, again, I always say younger kids. I get a lot of young kids that come in the room. This is where you don't want to go. This is showing you where you don't want to be when it comes to things. This is, James will identify characteristics of good citizenship, including truthfulness, justice, equality, and respect for others. And his goal talks about that he's going to use visual and verbal models. He's going to identify historic figures such as Paul Revere, Abigail Adams, World War II, women Air Force service pilots. What? My brother is 39, all right? He is more capable of being independent or staying home alone when my mom has to work or advocating for himself when needed. He does not know any historical figures unless they play sports, because sports are very important to him. So you learn how to learn, and then you learn your Preferences, right? That's what we do as adults, right? We've learned how to learn, and then we have things that we like to learn as adults. When have you guys been talking about Abigail Adams lately? No. Okay, so that's kind of where we go into the common sense. Common sense is okay. Now here's the thing. I brought this to the team, and I said, you know what? Probably not the most important skills for preparing them for further education, employment, and independent living. Oh, good. We're so glad that you said that. We just felt like we had to put a social studies goal in there because he was included in social studies. I said the social studies, the whole point of inclusion for him in social studies was actually social skills, group work, peer modeling, following tasks. It's not the content, it's the context of functioning in the classroom. And they were doing a lot of projects, so there was a lot of cutting and pasting and putting things in order, following directions, right? Working as a team. No, that's what the goal should be written on. It should be written on those skills, not on social studies skills. So here's some examples for you of, let's see, she's kindergarten. Okay, so this year was kindergarten. It's by March 2018, Rosa will be able to receptively identify and orally read 35 kindergarten high-frequency words when presented in isolation. So she gets one at a time. There's 35 kindergarten words, and the list is in the IEP. We can't get more clear than that, right? Here's your list. Make some flashcards. Flashcards in the car, flashcards at home, flashcards in the classroom, flashcards, picking up books that use those words to do that. So simple. Her present level of performance was very clear in there where she was at on that kindergarten word list, which is why this was an acceptable goal. So simple. Keep it simple, guys. All right, her next one was by March 2018, given groups of objects up to 20 or given a number 1 to 20, Rosa will be able to count the objects and answer how many or count out that many objects. Pretty clear, right? So if I gave you this and kind of said, okay, this is what she needs to do. You can have up to 20 objects. You can ask her to count, or you can ask her how many there are. Go for it. You'd feel pretty secure, like hanging out with this kiddo and working on some counting with her. It's pretty clear what needs to happen. With teacher guidance or visual prompting, Rosa will represent and solve addition equations up to 10 using manipulatives, visual models, 100%, okay? So you see how simple that is? That's where I want you to remember. I'm going to give you 2 questions that I have every parent ask themselves. Doesn't matter what skill level your child is working at. It doesn't matter how old they are. There are 2 questions that we ask. The first one is, can you think of 2 reasons that you need that skill in your life? Your life, not your kiddo's life. Remember I said further education, employment, independent living, and you're like, oh, that's too far. I don't want to talk about it. All right, so think about yourself. You're an adult. Do you need to talk about Abigail Adams? Nope, that is not a life skill. Don't need that one, okay? But I'm going to give some more realistic examples. If anybody's ever heard me I do a lot of online classes, and I teach a lot on Facebook as much as I can out there doing live videos, and I talk about this one all the time. Should coins ever be in your child's IEP? Penny, nickel, dimes, and quarters. Everybody's like, oh, yes, my child needs to know money. No. Because if I decided that I never wanted to touch a penny, nickel, dime, or quarter again in my life, I would be okay. All right? So IEPs are for the most important skills that your child needs. And then my second part is that you can't address outside of school. Meaning, let's use the school system for what you need help with for your child to learn. All right? If you're in a situation where you have really, really awesome outside team members that are working on things, let them go and do what they need to do on the outside, and then go, okay, but what are we not hitting? What are we not hitting? That's what we use the school for, right? So we say, there's not 2 reasons that you need to be able to use penny, nickel, dimes, and quarters. Well, what if I need to count out change? Oh my gosh, don't be that person at the cash register that holds me up. Don't do it. I don't like anybody who does that. Don't put your kid in that situation, right, where they're counting out that. So it's just, my brother, again, and I'm just, realistically, does he know what penny, nickel, dimes, and quarters are? Does he know? Yes. This is change. Yes, I know the transaction. Think about how many steps are in a transaction, right? I have to put down an object. I have to let the cashier touch the object. Then I have to scan it, put it in a bag, and then I have to figure out some way to pay, and then it comes back. If I didn't even talk about the money, there's a ton of money skills in there with that. Then there's skills of greater than, less than. My brother knows if he has $20 that he can't buy something that's $22. He knows he can't get something that's $19.99 because there's going to be tax on there, right? So I look at him, his friends. I look as a special needs sibling that I'm out with him. What are we using in the real world, and then how does that come back to what the school needs to teach our kiddos, right? So if you can't think of 2 reasons, there's other ones that kill me. This is when I start to show my age. When I say, like, there was a time when you had to learn how to read an analog clock, like you had to. All right, my brother knows how to use an analog clock. You say, Robert, what time? And he wears a watch. He loves to wear a watch, right? What time is it? He'll say, 10:30. Yep, 10:30. It's habit. We all do it, right? We have our phones with us. So again, this was a luxury. It's become a luxury. Back in my day of teaching, it was not a luxury. The kids that I was teaching, right? But really, analog clocks are only really in like libraries and government buildings. Sometimes they're around for decoration, and we all have technology with us all the time. So think about it. I'm not saying that your child can't learn coins. I'm not saying your child can't learn how to read a clock. I'm not saying that your child can't learn about Abigail Adams. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, do we take up the real estate inside of an IEP to do it? Is that the best place to do it? Probably not. We've got other things. We've got skilled teachers that want to teach. Let's give them the good stuff to teach, that we can have progress and build independence with your child in that way. All right. Ask questions all the time. I gave you 10 questions to ask, right? So these are just ways that we get more with less conflict. These are some of the strategies that we use. Ask for a trial. If you're asking for something, I want more speech therapy. Even more speech therapy could be a trial. Can we do a trial of an extra 30 minutes per week for 10 weeks and see if progress happens? All right, so ask for a trial. That is a compromise that I see some people that are trying to write down everything that's on the screen and take pictures. If you guys want a copy of, I emailed it, I don't know, are they giving you guys copies of the presentations? Because I'll give you a copy of this presentation. I don't have a problem with that. You guys can have that. Here, I'll stop just for a minute and tell you guys where to find. I have sheets that I'll give you before you leave. It has my website. It's just katherinewitcher.com. And my name's in the program if you walk out without it, right? Just katherinewitcher.com. Literally a little orange button will pop up. Email, right? Contact me. Just give me your name and your email and say, please send me the presentation. All right? So contact me. I'll email it to you. Not a problem. Ask for the data, so we don't assume anything's going wrong until we have proof that's going wrong, and if we can't find any proof, if there is no data, that's the first place to start. Then you're asking for data collection. If we don't have data, it's really hard to make changes. If there's no data, that's our starting point, all right? Create a timeline. Oh my gosh, well, they're gonna collect data and they're gonna get back to me. No. You have to have a timeline. How long are you collecting data? When are they gonna get back to you? When's the next meeting? Ask for timelines. Know when to document. Okay, so pretty much, we've said if it's not in writing, it didn't happen, right? So there are different ways to document. You could be documenting informally through email. That counts. All right, you can document formally through advocacy letters. That's something that I teach. It's a whole different separate gig there, teaching that. And then move away from the table, meaning take a break in your IEP meeting or even continue it if you need to. That's one of the least used strategies in general of, you know what, for today I need to be done. We can schedule a follow-up and just go. Or say, you know what, I need 5 minutes. I will tell you the momentum can change in such a great way when you stop the momentum that you don't like where it's going. Even if it's emotionally just overwhelming for you, you're like, you know what, I need 5 minutes. Go take a walk. I've hung out in the principal's office with clients a lot. Sometimes, most of the time I'm attending IEP meetings by phone now. And so I'm attending them by phone, and I'll say, excuse me, please take me off speaker, and hand the phone to, and I say it to the client, and I say, look at everybody in the room, turn around and say, I'll be back in 5 minutes. And it's like with that directive, then it's like, oh, okay, my advocate told me to. So, walk out of the room, take a breath, and then come back. Sometimes the team has come to a compromise because you've given them a chance. They're not so stuck in a no, or this is how it is, or we've never heard that before. They're not stuck in a no anymore because they've had a chance to breathe too without you in the room. So I want the team to work together. I am the biggest cheerleader for teachers and therapists and admins being able to do their job the way that it needs to get done. But having been on the inside of the system, I know how their hands can be tied and how it takes a parent to move that momentum forward to make that happen. There's a question on here that I don't have written. Can you show me the policy? If you hear a no, the question is, can you show me the policy? I'm not even saying you're wrong about the policy. I'm just saying show me the policy. This comes up a lot. I'll give you an example. Let's see, we just went through a lot of negotiations for ESY, right? Well, this is the ESY that the district offers. This is it. Well, that's not going to work for my child to maintain their skills or, make progress in a certain area where they had just started to make progress. It's not going to work. We need to do something more individualized. We need a tutor for 5 hours over the summer. We need to be put into the summer school program at this school versus the summer school program at that school, right? They kind of track kids into different programs and to do that. Oh, we don't do that. Can you show me the policy that's preventing you from doing that? There is no policy. ESY can be individualized. It is a school habit to offer one ESY program, and either you take it or you leave it. I would say about a quarter of my clients that I have individualized ESY programs. Their child does not show up for 4 weeks for 3 hours a day, Monday through Thursday for ESY. They have 10 hours of reading tutoring and 10 hours of math, or they are focused on therapies all through the summer and not on the academics. There are different things, or they're walk in and walk out. Okay, we're gonna take 90 minutes of speech a week, but we're gonna do it as a walk-in service, not as part of the general program. There are different solutions that can happen. When you're trying to present something and they're saying no, just, can I see the policy? Our school doesn't allow that. Show me the policy. Get your no in writing and get the criteria for yes in writing, okay? So this is a big one. I understand that you're saying no. Can you please tell me why? Our school doesn't allow that. Can you put that in writing? Well, no, just put it in writing. Like, we are not allowing because our school doesn't allow. Well, it's not really because our school doesn't allow. It's because we don't have the resources. Okay, can you put that in writing? No, it's not really because we don't have the resources. It's because. And so can you put that in writing? A lot of times, I'm not even arguing with them at that point, right? I've asked for something, they said no. I say, okay, can you put that in writing? They don't want to document it, which means that they're closer to moving to a yes. All right? And if they get the criteria for a yes in writing, this is where this one comes from a lot. You want your child to be in a different program, and they're like, oh, they don't really meet the skill level to be in that program. Okay, can you write down the criteria to get to a yes? Whew. Actually, I just wrote a letter for a kiddo this morning. 3 years old, 4 years old, going to be going to kindergarten next year, wants to start doing some inclusion at the preschool level, so he's ready to do some inclusion at the kindergarten level, and they've offered 1 hour of inclusion after a big long battle. I just got into the situation now. So mom hires me, she's like, they're offering me 1 hour, and I'm willing to take the hour, but something doesn't feel right. I said, well, what's the criteria to get more, and what are they going to do during that hour? How are they going to support? How are they going to give the visuals? How is your child going to know their expectations? How do we increase 15 minutes every month? What's the criteria for that? I want to know the criteria for the changes that you want to make. How do we get to a yes? Sorry, your child doesn't qualify for that. How do we get to a yes? That's not how we do it here at this level. How do we get to a yes? So ask for that criteria in writing. Outside therapy goals. Here's what's going to happen. As you guys are rock star parents, I would say the parents that come out to these conferences, rock star, right? You are finding the best of the best services, and you have these therapists, and you just know if the school would get on board with them, your child would make more progress. So sometimes we can make that happen, but we have to position it differently. One is your child has unique needs. We've never done that before. We don't offer that at this age. My child has unique needs. You've also never had my child, right? My child has unique needs. So that's in the law portion. already put my law disclaimer out there, but this is the law portion. Your child has unique needs, okay? Preparation for the future. Do they need this skill to prepare for the future? Meaning a lot of times a kiddo will exit out of PT, let's say, because they'll say, well, there's nothing else that we need to do in the school environment. You know, PT in school is just for school. If your child has an IEP, they're entitled to be prepared for further education, employment, independent living, which means accessing environments outside of the school. Again, that doesn't mean that I want your 5-year-old doing PT in the grocery store during school hours, right? But I do want them to continue to work on PT within the school so they have the opportunity to be as independent as possible in the community. All right? That's exactly how I put it out there, and they go, oh, well, I guess we could put her at least back on consult. Consult then moves to direct minutes, and we go from there. Access to their education, that's the other thing. If they're going to take away any therapies, especially for a lack of progress, no. Then you keep the therapist on by using some keywords of access to their education. They need this therapist so they can continue to have access to their education. That's also the wording that we use for technology a lot. We need an upgrade, we need more, we need the consultant in here, we need different things going on for technology because we need access to the education. When I have therapists that attend meetings or are asking for certain things to happen in school, I have to tell the therapist, this is good for you to tell your therapist, think like a teacher, not like a therapist. What is realistic, right? It's not a therapy center. It's not a therapy center. It's not going to be one-on-one. It's not going to be ideal situation. It's going to be in a school setting. What can be accomplished in a school routine? Have your therapist help brainstorm. They will see things that you don't see. An OT sees a crazy amount of things that can be done in a school versus, you know, but you have to push your outside therapist to think outside the box and say, what needs to happen in school? We're not talking about your center. We're not talking about at home. What needs to happen at school? And push their thought process that way. Observe your child's day. All right, ask for your child's daily schedule. You're going to observe at different days at times. Walk through their schedule for that experience. And get this, look at the room from your child's level. All right, we go in and we observe from up here. We can't understand why your kiddo's overwhelmed. Go here. Look at what's going on in the room. What are they seeing? How are they experiencing their day? All right? So there's some tips for observing. Medical versus educational. All right? So we have medical diagnosis, and we have educational eligibility. Getting additional medical diagnosis does not always change educational eligibility. All right? That's huge to know. You can go get your child labeled with 15 other things and the school will say, that's great, we've got it covered. And you're like, no you don't. You need to do some more. I've got all these things, now we have this documentation. But it's two different worlds. So I always say doctors can't write IEPs because a lot of times we have doctor reports that in the summary it's like, well, the IEP needs to have, and I'm like, doctors, you can't do that. You're making my job worse. Just say what the child needs and then let us translate it into what does that look like in the school, okay? So just because your neuropsychologist wrote recommendations for the IEP on there doesn't mean that those have to be done. Now, all outside reports have to be taken into consideration. Consideration can literally be, looks good, we feel that what we're providing is enough. And they document that parent submitted report, team read it, okay? So you need to pull out of a report, again, the top few things, because they're not going to change an IEP with 10 recommendations on there. Take out the top few things. You know what, the doctor recommended all of this. I respect everybody's, working really hard. Can we try to implement these too? No. How about on a trial basis? Fine. Or they say, no. Okay, can you please put that in writing? Well, our school just doesn't let us. Please show me the policy. Okay, so all those questions just kind of fall into this. I'm just sticking, I sound like a broken record, especially when I'm coaching a parent. So do you guys know I don't show up to probably 95% of the parents that I work with. I'll never attend an IEP. I'm giving you all of these words. And you're like, really? I'm going to say the same thing 15 times? Yes. Yes. It's when you come in with 15 different solutions and you're trying to go, no, just come in with your top 3 to 5 priorities of what needs to get done during this meeting and stick to it and use these words of showing me the policy and do those things. It will push the team in the right direction. All right, so 10 o'clock. That was my goal for you guys. So we have 30 more minutes in this room before you guys have other things to go to. Like I said, we'll move out that way for those that want to follow up. I'm actually going to jump down off the stage here, and I'm going to pass out these papers. And you guys ask me questions.